Welcome to Markigy, the science of marketing strategy, a bi-weekly podcast where all the cool marketers discuss their favorite marketing strategies, study by study. On this show, we feature marketing risk takers who believe long-term wins for the customer equal long-term wins for the business too. How? Human-led marketing, the combination of where science, creativity, and strategy meet, or as we also like to call it, Markigy. Let's break down the marketing trends, myths, and methodologies together. I'm your host, Leanne Dow-Weimer. Let's go. Good morning. This is Leanne with Markigy, and I'm joined here by Lauren Alexander, head of marketing at Neurohacker. And she has so many exciting things to tell us. I really can't wait to dive into it. But first, Lauren, will you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks for having me on, by the way. I've made my career in marketing. I started out in magazines, and that was incredible. And then kind of moved into agency work. I've worked with very large brands and very small brands. And my current gig is at Neurohacker Collective, which is known for, they're making their best-in-class supplements. They're best known for their brain supplement, Quality of Mind, which is a formula that helps with focus, memory, and drive. And actually, funny marketing story, I have worked for so many different brands, but this brand in particular was one that I fell in love with the product before I was working at the company. I honestly wasn't a biohacker or a neurohacker or any kind of real health nut previously. But as a marketer, and you can relate to this, we really are overworked. We just have this 24/7 cycle. We're making so many decisions and really working our brain really hard. And when Neurohacker, sent me a bottle of Quality of Mind and I tried it, I was floored how effective it was for me personally. How I was able to not crash in the afternoon from just emotional fatigue of making so many decisions. And it really led me to ask a lot of questions about the brain and about my brain in particular. What things I thought I understood, like as an adult, like you're like, oh, I'm this way, this is me, defining characteristics that were kind of thrown out the door once I learned about like the tools that you can add to your toolkit. And so it was almost like a conviction where I was like, oh, I guess I have to work with these guys because I really get the product. And so it's been a fun delight to oversee all the marketing. We're a small company, so head of marketing means working with product development, packaging, pay-per-click ads. We work with an agency, but I still run about a third of our Facebook campaigns myself, writing the ads, pushing the ad, managing bids, et cetera, working directly with influencers. So, I have a broad view of the entire, experience of being head of marketing for a company.
That's awesome. And kind of it reminded me of something that we were talking about right before our press record is I have this list of questions I ask people before they come on. And one of the questions that we were just talking about was how many cups of coffee you take a day or drink. But I mean, really, caffeine is sort of that blurry line between beverage and supplement. But, most of the things that I see is that there's never enough marketers, right? We could always have more people in that department. And that, we do push ourselves between the creativity, the science, the decisions that we make. So I really appreciate you bringing that up. Now, if we look at neuroscience as a marketing strategy, how can we kind of take that beyond surface level psychology and use it as a framework to change up our outward facing marketing?
For sure. I think there's 5 things that you really have to know about the brain in order to really wrap your head around all of this and use this as a weapon in your marketing arsenal instead of falling prey to some of the pitfalls. And one thing is that, the brain and the body is constantly looking for ways to conserve energy. And that the brain, pound for pound, uses more energy than any organ in the body. And so it's designed, number 3, it's designed to forget. And it's designed to over-index negative experiences. This is based on our survival instincts. And, although we're not out, in a field running from tigers or any other predators, still we still have that wiring in our bodies. And so it's really important to acknowledge that. And then number 5 is that our brain is designed to over-index emotional experiences. And so as a marketer, man, it's like this, we're constantly using so much energy to be creative, to make decisions. In a given day, between different, bid changes, creative optimization, negotiations, pricing, offers, all of that. There's hundreds and hundreds of decisions, as well as information we're filtering through. And so your brain is looking for opportunities to take shortcuts, looking for opportunities to selectively focus on certain things and to ignore other things. And so as a superpower, you understanding how the brain works can really set you up to where blind spots are likely occurring in your marketing initiatives.
Yeah, definitely. And there's so many amazing touch points that we could, spend forever talking about there. One of the reasons why I like marketing and how I personally interpret marketing kind of comes back to my exercise physiology undergrad and understanding on a cellular level things that are occurring within the body. And there's something I want to call out that should be a commonly known fact, but isn't, is that your brain takes, I want to say between 10 to 12% of the blood flow in your body at any given point. And so understanding just how much people's need to internally, physiologically respond to their environment, respond to the ads that you give them, respond to the context of the ad you give them, or even as a personal employee, how that interacts, that's pretty major. So when we're kind of looking at those 5 points that you brought up, what is an obstacle that you think that most people don't realize that they're running into when it comes to something like this?
Yeah, everything comes back to mental energy. And there's, a number of things I want to dive into, such as heuristics and shortcuts that the brain is taking. But before I go there, I wanted to talk just a second about mental energy in it itself. And I love the analogy of thinking of mental energy as like a bank account, and how much you wake up with in the morning, has a lot to do with your overall health, how much you slept, your emotional state, if you're fighting an illness of any kind. But let's say, you wake up with $1,000 in your bank account, your mental energy bank account, and everything you do draws from the bank account, from, putting your shoes on, to writing an email back, to making a hard decision about an employee, to, deciding data mine, everything draws from that bank account. Well, the thing that, again, going back to survival, the thing that the body doesn't know is 1,000 enough to make it through the day? Or is this a $20,000 day? Or is it a 500? So from the moment you wake up, it's looking for ways to conserve energy. And going back to the financial analogy of how to balance your budget, you either spend less or make more. And so the brain, what it's doing to spend less, it has, 3 different things that it's doing. One is process and habits. Those are ways to spend less energy. And so, things that you do without even thinking, how many times have you gotten in a car and you start driving a certain direction and you're not even aware of the process. And these are the habits, and being aware of how the brain is looking for habits and trying to kind of go on autopilot to conserve mental energy. The second is shortcuts and heuristics, which, these are everything from confirmation bias to anchoring. And these are tools that can help you, but also can create massive blind spots and biases. The next way is the brain filters out unnecessary information. The reticular activating system in the brain, which is located in the brainstem and thalamus, it literally controls selective focus. It's the thing classically referred to as the red car syndrome, where you bought a red car, you never noticed red cars before, and then you bought a red car and all you see on the road is red cars. Well, nothing changed with the percentage of red cars, but your body now filters that information as something that's important to you. And so, which is cool. There's ways to hack that, right? Like, and some fun things to do in terms of visualization to kind of augment that. But it is also something to be aware of, especially in marketing, when, you can hear something about the next traffic stars, oh, TikTok is like the biggest thing. And all of a sudden you hear more, TikTok's the biggest thing. And then your mind starts like over-indexing every time it hears about TikTok. Well, we could debate later if that's yes or no of it being, the next big thing, or if it already is the next big thing. But just to know that this cognitive process, there's actually a thing going on in the brain that's filtering for patterns and trying to not acknowledge a lot of information. It's designed to forget. And so we talked about ways it's conserving. Now there's ways to add more. One way to add more is through nootropics or brain supplementation or caffeine. Caffeine is one of the greatest. There is like a balance, because too much caffeine can lead to, all kinds of problems. So there's a hormesis that needs to occur of the right amount of caffeine, especially if you combine caffeine with L-theanine. There's a number of studies that show that that really does boost mental energy. And then another way to kind of boost your bank account and mental energy is through stimulating neuroplasticity. And this is a topic that I just find electrifying, because in my lifetime, there was a belief that after adolescent, neuroplasticity wasn't possible. And now, due to the research, we're finding that up until, moments before on your deathbed, you can still be generating and stimulating neuroplasticity. And it's still, being studied, but there are, several things that you can do to stimulate neuroplasticity. And the more things you stack into your life, the more kind of you're going to increase your mental energy bank account. And one is exercise. It's been shown that exercise can actually increase the volume of gray matter in the brain. There's meditation that longtime meditators are shown to actually change the structure of the brain. Diet, controversial, but of which diet is the right diet. But every person in the brain space will agree that an anti-inflammatory diet, healthy fats, a reduction or kind of ruthless elimination of seed oils are things that you can do to create a healthy brain. And then there's like fun stuff like brushing your teeth with the non-dominant hand, juggling, learning a language, learning a musical instrument, knitting, gardening are all things that you can incorporate to stimulate neuroplasticity.
Right. And so I know what neuroplasticity means, and you touched on the definition of it, but could you give us a formal definition of neuroplasticity?
It's really stimulating, neural connections in the brain. Another way to think about it is rewiring the brain. And there's a ton on it, but really I think that as marketers, in the same way that you have habits to instill for like healthy lifestyle, that you should look for adding a habit to stimulate neuroplasticity in your kind of hobbies or your time.
Definitely. And I would agree that that goes beyond marketers. But another clear example of neuroplasticity that I think really explains it for everyone to understand is that if you had a stroke and part of your brain cells were no longer given fuel, and let's say that like those brain cells stopped working, they're just there. Neuroplasticity would mean that your brain could find pathways around those no longer working brain cells and figure out a way to still accomplish some of what those brain cells had been accomplishing. Now, that's a very black and white example of it. It's not that simple. It's not that straightforward. There's, for lack of a better pun, there's a lot of gray to it, but that's kind of a clear way to understand it, where if you're coming from, like a very heavy marketing, finance, business background, that's kind of the medical definition explanation for it. Now, some of the things that you mentioned, I think are, especially important to kind of hit on, and that includes confirmation bias. So a lot of us have our hands in data and we're looking at results, or maybe we get a survey and we know what statistically significant might mean, but can you talk to us a little bit more about confirmation bias?
Yeah. And, I like to kind of bucket a lot of these heuristics together. Again, like the definition of a heuristic is like a rule of thumb, a shortcut, a mental shortcut that the brain does. And, confirmation bias is one that is very pervasive. And this is like noticing events that support prior beliefs, right? And kind of accepting that information to support the information. And it's definitely like a slippery slope and something that, I'm certainly guilty of. So, and also testing. So you have this hypothesis and you're like, okay, women only work for this demo or whatever. And you're like, this is and so you'll test your theory, but you will not test alternative theories because of the confirmation bias. And so, there's a classic example of, a husband and wife that are arguing, and the wife is saying, we never put down the toilet seat. And the man's saying he always puts down the toilet seat, and they're working on the same amount of data, right? There's no new information, but the woman, because she has a confirmation that he never puts the toilet seat down, she only notices when it isn't down. And the man, because he has a confirmation bias of saying that I always put it down, he only notices when he does put it down, but he doesn't pay attention or notice, the times that he forgets, right? And right. She as well. And so how this applies to marketing, oh my goodness, it's such an issue. And, there's things that we can do. Like one of the heuristics that it's like my kryptonite, and I know it, is this escalation of commitment. So this is one where once you've committed to something, where it's signing a contract or saying publicly that you're going to do something, it comes from that expression of throwing good money to bad. And my reasons a kryptonite for me is I have this like, make it work, I can figure it out mentality. And so a lot of times, even though the data is all pointing that like, this is never going to work, I know I'm not alone here. Like,
right. Or work out what cost too, right?
But there's it's a painful experience because I really am involved in the commitment. And so there's things that you can do and things that I've done in order to, I know this bias exists, and also the effort heuristic. So this is like the more effort you put into something, the harder it is to be unbiased about it. And think about this as like consumers, a landing page of like their effort of clicking through, and the more clicks that they do, and entering their email, and then entering more information. Or if you've seen, some of those VSLs are like an hour long, you're like, how does this even work? But it's because the effort heuristic is at play. The more effort that they've put in, it's easy to ask for a little bit more effort. Oh, a little bit more effort. I've already sunk this much effort. Well, think about setting up a campaign, and you've created these audiences, you worked creating the spokesperson, you have all this effort into it. It's really difficult to objectively look at the information. And the more effort you have put into it and the commitment as you've escalated the commitment. And the other side of that, is, so I'll get to some tips on how to like overcome the marketing bit of it. But then to be aware of that, everybody's going through this. And so if to your consumers, escalation of commitment heuristic, it can help with how you view placing upsells, how you execute a loyalty program, because they're already committed to your product. And this is a way to kind of further extend your campaign or your marketing objectives, knowing how these pieces interplay in the psychology.
Yeah, absolutely. So many things that triggers for me, and I love it so much. One, it helps you say, so if we're talking about marketing strategies that we as individuals are putting out there, it allows us to take a step and remember that sometimes you are Ursula, you are not the Little Mermaid, and that you need to admit when you're wrong, or, put a stop to something, even though, the sunk cost is a sunk cost. The other bit is that, I want to hear more from you about where you're taking this and not interrupt too much, but it's so fascinating ways that we can apply things internally and externally to our customers. So, we talked a little bit about like the heuristics and the neurological processes at play. Tell me more about kind of the next part of it that you were alluding to?
Yeah. So basically, I've condensed it to 5 tips, at least things that I've ingested and I'm putting to work so that I can be more proactive and to my blind spots, knowing the cognitive processes that are at play. So one is awareness and, thinking about thinking, knowing about how the brain works. Metacognition is like the fancy word for thinking about thinking, which I absolutely adore. And so being aware of where your pitfalls are on that, like I'm super aware that once I've committed, like I sign my name on something, it's like, I know that there is, and it's made me better at deciding on things I commit to, like knowing that that's a difficult thing for me to unwind has made me slower to commit to things, which probably in the end is great because they're, we have too many things. And so less things is great. So awareness. And then the second thing that's been really powerful is about keeping track of my goals. So before I engage in something, there's so many templates on how to do this, the SMART goals or KISS, or there's a SEAL Fit template from Mark Divine that's amazing for planning projects. But, in essence, like putting down, what's a win? When am I going to cut? What is a failure before you start? And, defining the project in those black and white terms so that I can go and pull it up and be like, whoa, I've reached when I sat down before I even started this thing, I've already reached that failure point. I already made a commitment to myself that I would pull out when I reach this point. And so it can be a dollar amount. It can be a timeline of, X amount of sales in this period, just having some kind of really clear cut and measurable moment of what defines a fail on a project. Or end to win, obviously, we got to be
right.
both.
It's like a double-edged escalation rule, right? So yes, and I think that that's so impactful because, a lot of times as leaders, it's our job to define before we get into the project what the project is, what the roadmap is, and where those cutoff points are. Like how are we going to rationalize what's a sandbox and what is our big like audacious goal that we're going to do. And so, there's some things happening kind of underneath the covers when we are intermingling things. So now, you and I didn't talk about this before, and I'm definitely not trying to Barbara Walters you. So when I was learning about how apps were created, there's this discussion of habituation and how people are searching for dopamine responses. And so, that kind of comes into play of how we are doing our metacognition of how do we give ourselves the correct dopamine responses. And to kind of take it one step into practical advice from what you're saying is that, I fool myself into doing things I don't want to do by giving myself a little bit of chocolate or some small treat to Pavlovian, but to give myself that extrinsic reward to accomplish them. But there's definitely some situations where, it's not always ideal or there's some limitations. Could you kind of go into more depth about that?
Yeah, for sure. And, one of my big points about knowledge about the brain is that the brain over-index emotional experience. And so, you're super happy when you get your chocolate, right? And so, and me too, by the way, and one of my favorite things other than coffee. And so looking for ways to create emotion, positive emotion, and being aware of negative emotion. Now, it's easy as someone who's made their meal on Facebook to have a lot of negative emotion when, there's changes on the platform or with the constant, the rug is being changed, pulled, ripped off the floor over there at Meta. And we have to persevere and come up with new strategies. But, there's no negative emotion more powerful than getting your account banned. And the horror, fear, like it's a visceral thing. And being aware that like your brain is controlling the situation in a powerful way when you experience that level of negative emotion. And so one of the things, staying objective, this is one of my other tips, is to like really ask yourself a question as regularly as you can when you're looking at data or making a decision. Is like, if I were not emotionally invested in this, what would I do? And for me, that really takes the wind out of it. It almost like puts me in a completely different state and allows me to kind of move through the process. Another one is to seek outside opinions. And so, this is where having an analyst on your team is really great, or having like an outside person, VA, or someone that can like put together data for you, or using your COO or someone who, one, isn't bonused on the results, someone who isn't working directly on the campaign, but that you can have as a sounding board for looking at information.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where, while it's not always fun to play quote unquote devil's advocate, when you do it to yourself and you take a moment and you examine all the different frameworks or perspectives that the situation could be seen as, I felt that myself, where it makes me more, it makes me less defensive. So if there's a conflict, whether it's a conflict like there's an error with Facebook or Meta, and for some reason I have to appeal a decision they made about my ads. Doesn't usually happen. Usually they're wrong, but it's a conflict that comes up. Or in a personal conflict where, you said something and someone took it a different way. When you have that ability to pause, take a deep breath, and look at it from the different perspectives, you do interrupt the responses going on in your brain by just simply breathing and counting to 10. Is it so disruptive? And when we look at pattern disrupting as marketers or as salespeople, like that's kind of your golden ticket to then being able to paint a different picture going forward. And I got goosebumps. I don't know why. I'm just so cheesy, but I love stuff like that because it's so powerful, and it can also turn into a situation where, and this is why you can't be full of, and it's my podcast, so I'm going to say, well, you can't be full of shit because people will see through it, especially if you're using a pattern disrupt. It might take them a couple extra seconds, but they'll be like, come on, seriously, you just did that to me? So credibility above all, but there are a lot of powerful ways to use these ideas for good. And kind of in that sense, if you're looking at the future of marketing and where it's at now, how do you think this plays into it? And where do you think things should go?
Yeah. I mean, the future of marketing to me is so exciting. I am I'm super creative and I have 100 ideas a day. That's a defining characteristic of me. And so, seeing the AI and being able to dump a lot of my creative ideas and have executions of them, maybe not perfect, but really fast executions of them, it's been just so exciting and incredibly gratifying to execute so quickly. However, I'm a little worried because of the ability, the volume that we're going to be able to execute. So we're already overworked. And so I'm worried. I'm already seeing this trend in some of my peers that the marketing hustle has taken a toll on health. And so I guess I'm a little wary. It's we're all going to have the ability to add 200 employees to our marketing team, thanks to automation and AI and things like that. But as a manager, we're not given the resources to manage these extra employees, if you will, and these extra campaigns, et cetera. And so I guess I'm a little more firm at this is the time that marketers really need to establish some healthy boundaries and habits and prioritize sleep, nutrition, physical activity, exposure to natural light, getting off screens for periods of the day. And because with the infinite and exponential curve that's coming, I think if we don't take a stand for our health, I just worry about this career profession in general, because I'm already seeing kind of the writing on the wall with my friends and colleagues.
Yeah. And I think that we all kind of feel that. Like when I chose marketing, I chose it because I was really hoping for a work-life balance. I had worked in jobs where I had to work nights and weekends, and, I had to be somewhere that was 45 minutes away by 6 a.m. And I had to be like on when I got there. I couldn't just be kind of sleepy, like, okay, I'll talk to you in 45. I had to be like present and energetic. And then I would have that day go all the way through until 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And that's not healthy. So I was like, yeah, you know what? Marketing, hopefully I can work business hours. And what you're talking about too, the volume of things and being able to manage that. And, it does require some, the word's escaping me, of course, but diligence almost, because garbage in, garbage out. If you aren't making sure that those million things aren't doing what they're supposed to do correctly, then they waterfall through the processes and they give you bad data, they give you bad, conclusions. And, or, like if there's just something as simple as an error in the code or your spreadsheet, that could be quite a lot of consequences, whether it's investments and it's definitely turning more into that, especially with social media too, that 24/7, super vigilant, super hyper vigilant kind of situation. I think that's a pretty valid fear. And especially in today's job market where, we've heard a lot about layoffs, and I was thinking almost earlier about how layoffs are the red car right now, because they are, if you look at a lot of these organizations, there is a lot of growth occurring and there's layoffs happening, but it's more of a correction right now instead of a back channel fix. But coming back to what you said about, we need to take care of ourselves, take care of our health, as in your position right now, you're kind of like this double-edged, this fifth time I said that, red car thing, but you have a unique perspective of being informed about things that benefit our health and wellness. And I know you want to share a little bit about that part too.
Yeah. I mean, so my perspective on health really changed because of seeing how a supplement could affect my health like that. And it kind of shook a lot of my beliefs in that. And then in a way, it was a gateway drug into really becoming a biohacker. And I'm actually working on a book right now that's going to come out next year, which is called The Biohacking Experiment. And it is about, all of these things that I've experimented. Some of them, are extreme, like neurofeedback, but a lot of the most potent ones are about sleep, exercise, diet, light. I don't think enough emphasis is on about getting natural sunlight every day, but how absolutely critical it is for emotional health, for biological health, for digestion, for sleep. In fact, one of the, if you're having trouble sleeping, one of the things you could do as an experiment is get 15 minutes of morning sunlight in the morning, and it will have a transformative effect on you being able to fall asleep at night. And these are things that are, sifting through the mainstream, but, it's slowly, because the problem is that we're glued to our desks and our screens and our phones. And that is disrupting a lot of these things that we need to do, like healthy boundaries on sleep and healthy relationships with outdoors and things like that. So I'm excited that there does seem to be an increase in interest in people wanting to kind of take back their health and not necessarily trust all the information from maybe one source, but kind of be their own, what we call N of one, which is just their own experiment. What works for you might not work as potently for me, but the commitment to continually valuing and optimizing your health being the goal. So
warm space in my heart because this has been something that I felt like my whole lifetime is that there's things that we can do that we can't promise outcomes, but we can promise a foundation that puts us at an advantage. You can never guarantee that all of your work toward your health is going to prevent 100% something bad happening to you. But what you can do is you can set yourself up in the best situation possible to have all the advantages that might sway things in your favor. And that's something that, I think we all need to take personal accountability on. But I also see people and have always seen people out there that want that, but don't know how to sift through the misinformation, the diet pills, the gimmicks, the things that are kind of late night TV-esque. And it is hard. And, I would not recommend that someone look for quick fixes in any way, shape, or form, but look for things that they can sustain that are going to make them feel good and that they give, appropriate optimistic cynicism to. And so, I think that there's so much here to talk about. If someone wants to learn more about this or about you or your book, what are the best ways for them to get in contact with you?
Yeah, so we put out a ton of information on our Instagram. So Neurohacker on this Instagram would be a great place. Our website, neurohacker.com. I also made, a special offer for your listeners, neurohacker.com/Markigy, where they can, take advantage of being part of your audience. So yeah, I'm really thankful for the chance to chat about all this stuff. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I appreciate you. And I just want to clarify, because, after a couple of seconds after saying, there's a difference between late night TV diet pills and the types of supplements that Neurohacker offers. I'm just going to throw that out there. I want to be very clear on that there's a divide there. But, there's always that, make sure it's right for your body. Talk to your doctor, all that kind of stuff. But I'm very excited about it because, I've also personally seen that my life has improved by just adding certain proteins into my morning routine or doing certain things. So I really think that no matter what kind of neurological setup your body has and your physiology has, that you can benefit from giving it certain advantages, and it'll make us better marketers. Yes. And better able to interpret the information that we receive from data, from biases, from surveys, from different interactions we have throughout the day. So thank you so much again, Lauren. I love conversations like this. This is why I do this. And then anyone listening, if you could, as usual, I'm going to request that you please like, review, and subscribe. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you again.
You've been listening to Markigy, the science of marketing strategy. If any of the strategies we talked about today inspired you to learn more, try them. Remember, the perfect strategy doesn't exist, only the one that gets done. Subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast player to make sure that you never miss an episode. Thanks for listening. Until next time.